Okay, so I'm going to be talking about ELIXIR. And trying to explain what ELIXIR is. We've been doing ELIXIR for 10 years. We'll see that shortly. I note that in the audience, I have the new director of ELIXIR, Tim Hubbard, there. And I also have the founder of ELIXIR, Dame Janet Thornton, who tells me it took her 6 years to fail to explain what ELIXIR is. And I'm going to try to do it in 6 minutes. So we'll see how this goes. Okay. So ELIXIR is effectively convening a European-scale technology ecosystem, which is the theme of this morning's session, as it were. So we're a European research infrastructure. That means we're an intergovernmental organization whose mission as a network is to try to coordinate life science resources across Europe, national capabilities. We have hundreds of databases, community-driven, nationally driven, nationally managed, so that they form a distributed, federated and sustained data infrastructure. And so that then we can use that as our data fabric, as it were, as for knowledge exchange, for science, for collaboration. So we're effectively bringing together databases, data management tools, software tools, registries, resources for compute, but also importantly things like standards, scientists and technical experts, and training. So it's the whole piece, right? At our heart is FAIR. So we heard quite a lot about FAIR yesterday. Findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. If you haven't learnt the mantra, now's the time. But we also do reproducible. So that's FAIR plus R. So this is at the heart. How do we make all that data? How do we make all our resources? How do we make our software findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, and reproducible? So we're really organized around a set of pillars. We have a science pillar, and we have a technology pillar. And here we're looking at different science drivers for ELIXIR. Human data and translational research is one of our key drivers, but we also have cellular and molecular research, and biodiversity, food security, pathogens. I mean, it's no good if we're all healthy, but there isn't any food. So that's all part of our remit. And then we have technology drivers, technology activities around research data management and the sustaining of our core resources and repositories that are held by organizations like the EBI, for example, reproducible analytics, and federated service delivery. And the idea is that in those different scientific drivers, we have technologies and shared technologies and shared common technologies that we can share across those different kinds of communities, but also the technologies that we bring, we can repackage and support those different communities as well. And I'll try to explain that a little bit later on. So in the federated health area, we have our own ELIXIR community, which brings together people, brings together our software engineers, brings together our researchers in order to be able to address things like federated human data. But we have a whole bunch of mission-driven European projects that act as drivers around that. But we also do proteomics and metabolomics and single-cell omics and microbiome and structural bioinformatics, all aspects to do with life sciences. And we also do things like food nutrition, microbial biotechnology, plant sizes, biodiversity. So our scope is quite wide. And that means we have to do quite a lot of convening, quite a lot of organizing around that. And I think that's really what I'm here to talk about, is how do we do that organizing. So the interesting thing about ELIXIR is that the resources, that means all the technical resources, all the data resources, all the people, are in nodes. And there are 25 nodes representing 24 countries, and the EBI, the European Bioinformatics Institute, which of course is so important, is its own country. We have around 250 organizations, an increasing number of organizations, and around 500 services and resources that we attribute as those members, those nodes, those national organizations, those institutes contribute. So that's quite complicated. So many of those resources are supported by multiple organizations, multiple countries. The UK has 28 organisations, and I'm head of Node along with Neil Hall of the Earlham Institute, the UK Node. We have 28 organisations, around 40 plus services that we kind of contribute to this community initiative. The hub is based at the Genome campus and in Hingston, the EBI, it's an EMBL organisation. It provides a secretariat, it coordinates activities, it doesn't have any of the services. So that means this is an interesting convening job. It's decentralised. Some of the services that we use are our own, those 500. Some are others from other research infrastructures or other community-driven activities. So we're really around enriching and enhancing and de-siloing those data resources, exploiting to the full all the different registries and resources that we have, and supporting and sustaining them, which was mentioned by Caroline, the importance of sustaining these things, as well as training and stewardship and mentoring, as was mentioned by Matt and Harry as well. So we're really in the business of retrospective interoperability nudging. That's what we're doing. We build plumbing in order to be able to bring all these things together, in order to be able to create integrated solutions in order to be able to support mission-driven scientific needs. And so we had a picture like this from Andrew yesterday, and when you might think, well, we've got all these different services and they all have different interfaces. They're all built independently. They're all built by people in black t-shirts eating pizza who didn't know that they were going to have to link to somebody else's solutions in order to be able to create the information flow between those different databases or pieces of software, for example. We could try to standardize. As you probably kind of guessed, that's going to be almost impossible to standardize across that kind of range of things. So we standardize where we can, but we basically do very flexible adapters. So rather than everybody using the same plug, we build very fancy adapters so that you can deal with plugging different things together. So what I've kind of trying to get across here is this is matrix management when on a kind of Uber scale. So our delivery teams are our communities. They have their own delivery teams. We have projects, and this is a small collection of logos. You can't do an EU project without a logo. Here is some EU, these are the current EU projects that we're currently doing. These are big projects. We have products. So these are actually the databases, the computational workflow platforms, the registries, the compute environments that we actually operate, and they have their own teams. And then we have the nodes, and we have 25 of those. So this is matrix management. So surely this can't work. Yes, it does. It actually does, because we spend a lot of time building communities and people to make it work. And I'll give you 3 examples of it working. The first is convening a tools ecosystem. So this is the reproducibility, analytics, and infrastructure piece. So we built by assembling the various different tools in order to be able to support computational workflows. And the emphasis here is on not reinventing, the emphasis is on assembling. And I was really pleased to hear that Andrew emphasized that in his talk, right? Because this is what we want to do. We don't want to reinvent when there's already things there. We take the best that everybody uses and we put it together. And that's what we did, building this confusogram, which describes a computational workflow environment. And the emphasis was on interoperability, as I mentioned. It's about what are the APIs, what are the digital objects that we move, what is the metadata framework. And Peter will be pleased to hear GA for GH. I don't know where Peter is. Where are you, Peter? Oh, there he is. GA, he always says, nobody mentions GA for GH before I do. Well, I have now, so there we are. Now that, for example, has been adopted by practically all of the projects that we're associated with. So here's Rob Finn from the EBI, and he's part of the ELIXIR EBI node, of course, and he runs Magnify, which is all to do with the microbiome, and in particular marine microbiome, but that doesn't really matter. And what he's built is has a whole series of pipelines for metagenomics for assembly, and the microbiome for annotation and for analysis. And what he's done is, by using these technologies and tools, we've changed the technology ecosystem he works in, and that's changed their way of working. So they've got, and this is a quote he told me, they have now reproducible pipelines where they perhaps didn't quite so much before. They have a simplified code base, which Caroline will like, with testing, simplified testing, accelerated functionality, workflow reuse, and shared digital objects. So it's changed the way, accelerated the way, made it more comprehensible, which is exactly what Caroline was talking about. We've got quite a lot of experience in this, and so now this month, we're now launching and running the European Virtual Institute for Research Software Excellence, which is a joint enterprise with many organizations, led by ELIXIR with the Software Sustainability Institute. It's all very intertwined, isn't it, these activities. We've also convening a knowledge ecosystem. So this is a community-driven information right-sizing exercise. There's so much information about how do you do research data management, but most of it isn't designed for biologists. It's designed for librarians, really. So instead, we assembled a knowledge space driven off GitHub in order to be able to describe how do you do data management? What are the standards? What are the best practices for our community and elsewhere? There's about 126 pages of this, and it links into all of our registries, like the standards. There's over 1,500 standards. The training materials, we have over 2,500 training materials. The tools that we've assembled. So this is really confusing unless you have a directory for it, a navigation space. So we've assembled that. 189 bioscientists have contributed so far. So this is assembling. This is actually convening a community, and every single node, plus the USA and Australia have connected up. And then finally in this section, we're talking about a convening of a data ecosystem for sensitive data around federated service delivery. So this is, how do we do secure cross-border access to national genomic data and corresponding clinical data, built around the federated EGA platform, European Genome Phenome Archive, again using standards from the GA4G8. And this really emphasizes the notion of data visiting, metadata traveling. So you don't travel data at all. They travel the metadata, but the data stays at home. And this uses all that federated analysis platform that I described, and it uses that knowledge platform, but configured this time for the beyond the 1 million genome program. So we took the workflow analytics environment that I showed you, and we took the knowledge environment I showed you, and it's been reconfigured for this particular problem. That's how ELIXIR rocks. So we need drivers, of course, and one of the most powerful drivers that we had was infectious diseases and COVID. So to give you a little example, again, of the effectiveness of our infrastructures is by COVID project. We have over 243 data hubs have been mobilized across Europe. We've connected them, the databases, so this is the big public community databases like ENA and PRIDE and so on. Standardized metadata framework in order to be able to assemble that data into a portal. Putting it into our analytics platforms that I already explained, for doing analysis, for doing genome annotation, for doing automated monitoring, and a guidance, again, using our knowledge framework, this time for infectious disease. So ELIXIR has all of these kind of technologies and approaches, and partnering with HDR UK, we're bringing those technologies to HDR UK, and HDR UK is bringing their mission, as it were, through our federated analytics platform, through the TRIFIX project that will be spoken about later on by Phil, but also through the European Network of Trusted Research Environments, which launches this month, which is a big European activity. So to sum all that up, we effectively we've convened a technology ecosystem of techniques and services and standards, and with its associated different governances around knowledge, around what we might call fair services, like ontology services or identifier services, or access, login services, which people really want and people don't fund very often because they're just useful as opposed to sexy. And people fund sexy stuff, not useful stuff, sadly. We have a whole section on data management and managing and sustaining trusted archives, and we have reproducible analytics, which includes, of course, AI. And we're feeding the Pac-Man here of community applications. This actually is a windmill feeding a Pac-Man, if you look at it in an appropriate way. So this is to emphasize the fact that we're infrastructure that feeds applications. So our user base is really dominated, I would say, by application innovators and service providers, because we're infrastructure, combining those services and feeding applications, as it were, really doing smart reuse of all that. But we have to also honor the service identity of each of our services. So how do we do this from the point of view of convening people? Well, we are all ELIXIR. That's how we have to think of ourselves. We are a village raising an infrastructure. This is a picture of our all hands from last year. We had about 350 people physically there. There's Emily. There's me. Emily's a bit shorter, it turns out. Who knew? And we bring together everybody from all disciplines, all aspects. Because really, what we're doing is people wrangling. That's what we're doing. This is cat herding on a massive scale, because what we have is a lot of lent contribution with competing priorities and demands on resources and time. So the first thing I'll do is echo Emily's point about valuing the infrastructure. That science, the data infrastructure has science in its own right, and therefore you have to value innovation around it. And that requires encouraging things like skunk works. And skunk works is where you put together a team who ignore all the structures of an organization and just get together to solve a problem, regardless of what the organization is framed as. And it's really powerful. Actually, most of the things I just told you about were mainly built through skunk works. Okay, and you have to value the software and data developers and the providers by crediting them. And I think that was mentioned by Harry and others as well, Matt. As a good academic, just like Caroline, you go to the literature. There's lots of literature about how to organize a community. There's the 10 Simple Rules literature about how to organize communities and collaborate. Lots of it. My favorite is How to Ruin a Collaborative Environment, which I strongly recommend you read, and I've been in organizations that have done every single one of those rules. So I'm not going to give you 10 rules. I'm going to give you 5 with 3 recurring themes. First, trust. You have to build trust in your community. Second, you need thrust. So you need to be able to really drive it and be able to execute it. And finally, transparency. You need to have extreme transparency. So here are my 5 rules. The first, you need to have drivers with dedicated effort and group identity. So we have organizations within, or structures and groups within ELIXIR to deal with each of our communities. So this is our circle outside, and our technologies. And each one has multiple team leadership and multiple nodes participating. Because this is going to be the way that we convene our users and our communities, and it's also the way that we can bridge out to our projects and to our products. For this, they are all created and owned and led by members, and the members are given agency to run, freedom to operate, all of them. So there's trust there. There has to be commitment and investment, so there has to be time and money and champions and what we call in the open source community information radiators that will move between the different communities, and that's your thrust. And there has to be transparency in how you balance the competing demands of all the people contributing to that around their resources and so on. ELIXIR has dedicated 41 million euros in the next 4 years just to do this glue, people glue. That's all it's there for. Because we're all in our own bubbles, and we have our own perspective and our own language, so we have to recognize our bubble, and then we have to recognize the bubbles of everybody else, their weird practices and priorities, and then build bubble bridges. This takes time, and there are no shortcuts. It will take time. Secondly, we operate an extreme open opportunities culture with joint ownership. And this means open everywhere, everyone, all the time. So we take the open source collaborative environments that these guys work in all the time, we all work in, how you do collaborative development, but we do it for everything. We do it for the teams, for the minutes and the calls and the leadership and the meetings, and I said meetings twice, including things like collaborative minuting. So if we have a meeting, everybody writes the minutes. Everybody does. And it's all open. So you don't wait for somebody else to have done the minutes. And that means you have ownership of the minutes, for example. And that's a very powerful mechanism for open communication. If you show up and do, you get rewarded. And this is just for one of the products, which I happen to lead, Workflow Hub, you can see all of the different ways that you can engage. So we're operating kind of in an onion model, which is a classical software engineering world of the core and then contributors and then those who are supportive and those who are the observers and users. And we have to support in ELIXIR, therefore, people drifting in and out of that. So some people become core and you want to reward them, and some people drift out to be observers. You have to support that because we support actively pigs and chickens. So pigs are, so that's breakfast, right? For breakfast, if you've got eggs and bacon, the chicken's involved, but the pig's committed. And this is the model. So that's, in software engineering, you work out who are your pigs and who are your chickens. And they transform in strange ways. Anyway, the third thing is you have to get a sense of belonging and of getting stuff done. And so we have things like biohackathons. So this is the biohackathon for last year. There were 350 participants. We brought all together, everybody, for a week in a nice place in Spain. And everybody, trainers and early career researchers and so on, dedicated activities with a purpose that were designed and owned by the community, right? Not on behalf of the community came up with what they needed to do. Because you need smart, regular communication. Yes, you need to respect people's time, and you need to respect people's energy, but a 10-minute chat every other month isn't going to do it for when you're really building stuff. You need those information radiators and cheerleaders again. It's the same with our All Hands. The All Hands meeting of ELIXIR is driven by symposia, meetings, and workshops proposed by the community, done by the community, and the hub provides the biscuits. That's the deal, right? Fourth, clarity on the mission. Clarity is not the same as control, right? So we have to rally our troops behind a worthwhile but tractable mission, like build the Workflow Hub, which is a sharing platform for computational workflows. And everybody gets skin in the game with clear goals and expectations, open plans and practice, and then we listen, observe, and adapt. Right? Because if you don't adapt, you'll just get stuck with champions. Now, I run Workflow Hub, which we operate like this, and clearly the Australian Biocommons were really engaged, and so we appointed the Australian Biocommons as the product owner. The fact that we did it in Europe, who cares? Right? Here I'll mention the notion of eagles and mice. So in any group, you need eagles who see everything, see the vision, see the 50,000 feet, and mice who do the detail. But if you've only got mice, you'll just get people who are worried about deliverable 2.3 in task 5.7.2, and you don't get anywhere. If you've only got eagles, you don't finish anything. So you need a mixture. And finally, in this 5, you need to directly couple developers and users on real examples. Because solutions are what you need, not bags of technology. And it's actually quite surprisingly rare when technology is the solution. It's actually adoption of technology is rarely because of the technology. It's to do with the people being able to use it, or the right thing, or governance. Okay, so these are the issues. So you have to iterate with just enough, not a big bang plan. Have a master framework, but remember that ideas come from the bottom up, from those who are really engaged. And you have to, again, reward reuse, not reinvention. Because developers love to build new shit, and rather than use somebody else's. And you just can't do that right here. And here's a picture of the prototype you think you'll need and the prototype you actually need. And for that, you need to closely bond with your users. Production systems, we're linking together databases that were never intended to be linked together. Those production systems can't just suddenly stop because you've just invented some new technology that could link them together. The technical expertise needs to be developed. Interoperability is actually technical debt to those organizations. It's cost because they're running something, they're already running a service, usually on the absolute bone of what they have as resources, and now you're asking them for something additional. So you need the users and developers to both commit to one delivery team. If you only have one and not the other, you're really screwed. So if you want to walk fast, walk alone, but if you want to walk far, you have to walk together. And it takes time, right? So in conclusion, here's a couple of points. This is a piece of text from Stian Solarese, who is in the audience. There he is. He's part of ELIXIR UK and HDR UK, as indeed am I. And this is from his PhD, where he says his PhD is really driven or was born out of the ELIXIR way. Collaborations where institutional and project boundaries are blurred out in favor of jointly building pragmatic solutions. And that basically sums it up. And he also calls out those who organize and participated in the ELIXIR biohackathons, which always inspires me and has helped build our communities. And this is an individual, because in the end, we're all individuals. You can say, I'm not, if you're a Monty Python fan now. No, okay, you have to be a certain age. But this is really, we're all a bunch of individuals. And so we're affecting the individual as well as the collective. And this is my last slide, when I was writing this talk, I got stuck on Friday. And so I put up the ELIXIR bat signal. Like, can anybody, so here's a question, how do we convene in order to build our communities? And 32 people answered within 8 hours with all the materials that we could discuss. Now that is people, that is relationships, that is bonding, that's comradeship, right? This is what we have made in ELIXIR, but it took time and effort and resources to be able to do it, and a willingness to be able to be together for our mission. And that's the end of my talk. So thank you very much.